basically, pre-flop is I'm going to be very aggressive, especially from the small blind. I'm going to be raising every single button, and from the big blind, I'm going to be re-raising a pretty wide range, 15% to 25% of hands probably, depending on who I'm playing against, and also going to be flatting a pretty wide range, especially when we're 200 big blinds deep like we are at these tables. So without further ado, I'll get into the gameplay and try to bring up some important stuff. Both of these hands are going to be re-raises for me. Not to say that I wouldn't flat either of these with some frequency. In fact, I probably flat King Jack off a fair amount, maybe about half the time. The reason being is I like to have some broadways that I'm flatting pre-flop to be able to rep a real range on Broadway type boards, like king high, king queen high boards and stuff. Those are boards I'm going to want to check raises a bluff sometimes, and to balance that, I'm also going to want to have some real hands. So anyways, on the left I actually do flat, ace queen, which is something I don't do very frequently, but decided to here just kind of for deception and no other real reason besides that. At this point I have no read on the player, so anyways, on this flop, I had the best hand a very high percentage of the time, and also both of my cards, if I do hit a pair on the turn, are great bluff cards for him. He's going to be bluffing both of those cards when he has air a lot of the time. So I think check call is the best line. There's not any value to check raising, and it's kind of a bad semi-bluff given I don't fold out any better hand probably that's betting the flop. So on the turn I do hit gin, and I'm just going to check call and check call any river basically is the plan. But this particular river is a little bit interesting. I think it's one of those rare spots where my opponent cannot really value bet thinly or bluff very much on this river, which definitely seems contradictory, but I think it's one of those rare spots where my range for calling or continuing to a bet on the river is so strong that he cannot value bet hands like ace 4, and he can't bluff very lightly either, with very wide range, because I'm going to have 9x or ace-x so often when he bets and I call, or just when he bets. When I get to this river, I'm going to have one of those hands very, very often, and I just don't think it's profitable for him to value bet lightly or bluff a lot. So I actually decide to lead out and fold to a raise, but lead out to try to target those ace-x hands that probably won't value bet, and also pocket pairs like jacks, tens, queens, that type of stuff that would bet the turn for value, but check behind the river most likely. So I think that's a pretty good spot to lead out on the river, but maybe not exactly standard either. So with a pocket pair here on the left, very standard flat this deep. 4 betting doesn't make a whole lot of sense, I don't think, and folding would probably be criminal this deep. So I'm going to flat call, and on this flop there's really nothing to do when it's that coordinated and hits his range pretty strongly on an ace queen x two-tone board. So not too much to say about that. So far, we've only played about 20 hands versus this guy, but we do have a few hands on him before that. So we have about 30 hands on him, and so far he looks to be like some sort of pretty aggressive tag, raising 100% of his buttons also, which is good, I think, and 3-betting, about 20% so far, which is also very good, and C-betting near 100%. So we can expect so far this guy is probably more on the aggressive side. We don't want to make our read too strong yet, but at this point we're starting to get a little bit of an idea of how he likely plays. So Um, my range for big blind flatting, as you can see, I flatted pocket sixes. Um, Sixes is definitely a flat for me, pretty much always. I don't think there's enough value in re-raising it, and I don't think it's particularly weak enough to want to bluff with it. I think it has enough post-flop value, uh, just the pair value in flatting. Some of the weaker pocket pairs like pocket twos, pocket threes, I often re-raise, especially 100x deep. But that's mainly because I don't think I can get to showdown quite as often with those hands, and it's certainly close. You know, there's not a whole lot of difference in value between pocket sixes and pocket twos, but there's a little bit, and you have to draw the line somewhere if you are going to. So, you know, and not to say I always re-raise pocket twos, but I'm much more likely to than pocket sixes. So early in the match, you're going to see me defend a pretty wide range of hands. And this is not only because he's raising so many buttons, but also because early on in the matches, I like to play slightly looser than what I think is probably optimal. The reason being is that I think I only show a very slight loss on loosening up some pre-flop, and on the flop also. But that slight loss is overcome by the amount of extra information I can gain for later on in the match. So right here with 9-8 off, that's certainly a very loose pre-flop call, even 200x deep, when I don't know too much about him. But that's pretty much precisely why I called pre-flop. And I'm going to extend here. I want to get as much information about him as possible, as early as possible, so I can leverage that information later in the match against him. And on this flop, on the queen 5 deuce, you know, it looks pretty full of shit to raise this flop. That's definitely true. To most any, you know, average to good player, he's definitely going to be wary of someone who is bluff raising this flop, or sorry, excuse me, is raising this flop. But on the other hand, I think so early on in a match, I think most players, especially at small stakes, primarily at small stakes, are less likely to play back in a spot where the other player looks full of shit. And on top of that, a queen high board is generally, you know, when you have no information on the other player, a queen high board is generally a better board texture to bluff raise than an ace high or even a king high board, just based on how often the other player has a strong enough hand to continue. And that's something, you know, it's hard to exactly explain beyond, you know, you just need to fool around with Poker Stove or a program like Stocks Combo to figure that out. So I do bluff raise and he fairly quickly folds. So at this point, you know, I'm thinking maybe I can get away with messing around with this guy a little bit, which is something that I would say is indicative of most smaller stakes heads-up players or any type of players, any type of small stakes players, is that versus tags, you can generally get away with some kind of bluffs that you might not be able to get away with at higher stakes. So, table on the right, I checked back king high on the flop, basically because I had a tiny bit of showdown value, that if everything got checked down, I might win, you know, some percentage of the time a showdown. And as well, I think an ace high, two-tone board with middling cards, I'm going to extend here, is a fairly coordinated board when you're looking at pre-flop flatting ranges from out of position. I think he hits that board or is able to check raise or continue on that board a fair amount of the time to make a bet with any two cards probably unprofitable. That's another spot where you'd want to play around with Poker Stove a bit. On the left here, we missed the pre-flop and flop action, but basically what happened was I re-raised pre-flop and bet the flop with a gut shot. And on the